what I really had to do, there was a lot of triggers. There was a lot of triggers in that relationship, not just for me, but also for him. And it was fair enough, right? And that's the thing to also understand is when we notice that we're triggered about something, it is actually okay. It is fine. It is perfectly natural to be triggered. And I think a lot of the time, like you said, Ellie, we've been taught to suppress our emotions. We've been taught to be like, oh, we're triggered. Ignore, not okay, unsafe, bad. Emotions, trigger means we bad. I speak like that as like, I feel like some monkey brain. So that's why I speak like that. Because it's so it is, right? It's like, this trigger, me bad. That's literally what our unconscious sounds like, right? It doesn't make any sense because we're not really going from what is actually true. We're going from based on our wounding, based on what that situation is reflecting to us from our past. And that's what a trigger is. You know, it's really a memory coming back to be healed. And so just noticing that trigger and noticing that that's there and be like, oh, okay, cool. This is actually okay. It's actually okay that I'm triggered. And in that moment, I knew the best way for me to deal with that trigger was to be calm and quiet because I knew in that moment, anger, and anger, just FYI, guys, is something that I didn't always feel in my life, which those ones are the scary ones. I was the scary one, okay, because I'd suppressed my anger all my life. And so then forming a relationship with that, it comes up quite intensely. You know, when you first start to feel it and start to create a relationship, it comes up quite intensely. So for me, my anger in that moment was communicating to attack. Like that was it. It was like I wanted to attack, I wanted to hurt him because of how hurt I felt. And really underneath that anger, because that anger for me was just this protective mechanism for that grief underneath that I was feeling, which was essentially sadness, abandonment that I was going through or feeling like he didn't love me. And so I wanted first attack, but really what I anchored into was in that moment when I wanted to attack, I was like, okay, I've got to be silent. And I just let him know. I was like, okay, look, we've got to be silent in this moment. I'm just going to be silent because I need to just connect with me. And then from there, when I connected with what's under this anger was grief of abandonment, and I was like, okay, cool. Can I connect with love in this moment? Can I connect with my heart? Can I actually connect with what I would love to create? How would I love this relationship to look or this interaction to look? Like you said, Ellie, with you and Clara, it's like you're really great with communication, right? It's like, how would I love that relationship to look? How would connection? Her and Claire want to stay connected. And essentially, that's what love is. When we're communicating from love or wanting to create love, that's connection. And like you also touched on, Ellie, is, you know, our triggers are there for separation, or our ego is there for separation, and love's there for connection. So I had to really use my will, like you said, to actually anchor into love. Because in that moment, when you're triggered, you don't really want to anchor into love. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of forward energy, right? Because it's intense. It's an intense feeling in your body. And so anchoring into love in that takes a little bit of time, takes a hot minute. And so when I anchored back into my heart, I was like, okay, heart, and imagine that my heart is actually a separate being to me that can communicate to me from love and having trust in that. Hey, heart, what would we love? Okay, what we would love right now is to set some really clear boundaries, and this is what they are. And although in that moment I was so triggered, right, it feels really hard to communicate, but as soon as you do, the trigger diffuses. You know, the energy starts to diffuse in that moment, or it did for me anyway. When I started to communicate from love and anchor into that, it started to diffuse, and it actually created a reconnection, which was beautiful. And in that, even though for him, he still felt a little bit disconnected, he felt more connected to me, even though he felt a little disconnected in himself. So he made movements. Didn't fully heal it, but we made movements in the right direction. And that's just from being able to notice that I'm triggered, being able to actually form the willpower to be like, hey, I want to choose something different here. Hey, this is my wounding. Hey, I can feel that this is childish, not childlike. You know, it's childish. I wanted to hurt him. Like you would in the playground if someone steals your toy. I wanted to throw it in his face. You know, like that's the energy of our ego. And so noticing that when we want to do these childish things, and then having that authority within ourselves to be like, I want to be the author of my life. You're in the authority. You want to write your own story. And when we connect with our own willpower, we do that, right? We're like, we're the authors. What do we want to write? What do we want to write about? It's definitely not recreating this trigger, it's something else. And that's the beauty of will. And even just that, knowing that you're the authority of your life, like, what story do you want to write? And this practice of anchoring into love, noticing what love is telling you to do, and also noticing what the other side of that is doing, what that real emotional charge is wanting to do, that puts you in that authority seat because you get both stories and you get to choose which one you write.